Welcome to Healing Your Families. This is Emily Penrod, and I help you as a parent go from frustration, stress, and overwhelm to calm, confidence, and peace so that you can achieve the quality of family life that you desire. That's what I want for you. I am excited for our episode today. This is going to be the first in a series on communication. How important is that in a family? And I'm so honored to have as my guest my friend Pascale Dube, and she is a communications expert. So Pascale, welcome.
Hi, Emily. Thank you for having me. I'm so glad that we get to have this discussion again.
Yes. Pascale, I interviewed Pascale on my podcast show almost a year ago.
Yeah, almost a year ago. That's right.
And I like the way you got into, everyone has a unique journey or path that leads them to what they're doing. Just tell us your story.
Oh God, that could take hours, but we don't have hours. So I'll just make sure.
Reader's Digest version.
I'll shorten it for you. I had a very weird professional life until, of course, COVID hit. My last corporate job, I actually been working in the media industry for a narcissist. And after that, I was like, no way, Jose, I need to start my own business. And so I started coaching leadership. I've been working in communications for, 20 years. And I started my leadership coaching back in Montreal, where I'm living in Montreal. And my heart wasn't really like completely into it. And when COVID hit, I saw all of those families up here in Montreal and in Quebec struggling, with the lockdown, seeing teenagers really struggling. And so I was reminded with my own story and my own upbringing as a teenager, because we've had trauma in my family when I was growing up, and my teenage years were basically me raising myself. And so I knew what kind of a toll it could take on a teenager to struggle that way. And I decided, you know what? Parents need to learn how to be the leaders that their kids need. And so I combined my two experiences, communications and leadership coaching. And I decided, okay, I can apply that for parents to help them communicate better with their teenagers and mend some, tense relationships that they might have with their teenagers. And that's how I came to start parent lead coaching. And I started over a year ago, and it's going really, really well.
And that's what helped us connect. That's what drew me to you, is that idea of parents being the leaders in their home, how important that is. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. And I think, I always say parents do the utmost best that they can with the tools that they have and what they know. But we are all humans, we're all fallible, and we don't know everything. And when hard times hit, I think that's when we realize that, okay, now I cannot figure all by myself. I need help. And it takes courage to ask for help. But once you get it, God, you don't regret that you asked for it. And it's really, leadership is not about having all the answers. Leadership is about having a strategy to surround yourself to help you and become better. It's a growth mindset. And parents, the learning curve for parenting is like almost vertical. And so you cannot learn everything, and you cannot find the answers by yourself. And sometimes you don't have time. It's overwhelming being a parent. I always say parenting is the toughest job there is. So why not hire help to help you out?
I love it. And I love the fact that you're going to share with us 5 strategies. To improve communications with your teen. So what's the first one?
Well, it's quite simple. And when you understand that you're dealing with humans, but teenagers are like tiny humans becoming adults. So they're kids becoming adults, but they're still human. So they've got the same faults as you have as a parent. The only difference is that they don't have the experience you have. So in dealing with humans, there's always the same, what I call the pillars of communications. And those 5 strategies are actually extracted from what I call the 5 pillars of communication. So the first strategy is, and it's always about being aware and being conscious. The first one is be conscious of your emotional state and self-regulate your emotional state at all times. Because when you come into a conversation with your teenager, teenagers are different from us because their prefrontal cortex is not as developed as ours. And so they process all the information from the environment, they process it with their emotions. That's why sometimes you try to be rational with your teenager and it doesn't work. And then you start to be frustrated. And then you come into your emotions. Now, you can self-regulate your emotions way better than your teenager can because you've got this experience. So when you come into a conversation with your teenagers, try to make sure that you're in the right emotional state to have the conversation you want to have with your teenager. If you want to have, discipline related or an explanation or something that's harder, make sure that you come into the conversation with a positive mindset, with an open heart, and be really ready to have the conversation and be in an emotional state that will not trigger your teenager, basically. So that's the first strategy.
And that just ties in other episodes. We talked about emotional intelligence and why it's important for parents to develop it and then help teach it to their children.
Yeah.
So first they need that emotional regulation.
Yes, and it's actually applied anywhere. If you've got any relationship,
yeah.
I mean, self-regulation when it comes to emotions and emotional quotient or emotional intelligence, self-regulation is probably the best skill that you can have. And it's also a very good skill that you can teach by example to your teenager. So by mastering your own inner world and by showing it, you're gonna probably avoid a lot of the conflict that you may have with your teenager. So that's the first one. The second one, and I always say that people think that communications is about speaking or providing information, like spilling things out. But we've got two of these. We've got two of these, the eyes, and we only have one thing that, expresses and sorts and provides information. So communications is a lot more about listening than it is about speaking. And when I say listening, there is approximately 80% of the information that I call listening that actually come through your eyes. You can decipher the emotional state that your teenager is just by listening. So just by observing. Observation for me is also listening. It's part of, feeling the room, if you will. And communicating for me is a lot more about listening and having an open heart than it is about speaking and giving your answer or your comeback. Because when things get heated, we tend to get in our heads and we stop listening and we're just looking for the comeback. That's
so listening, meaning you're not only listening for verbal communication, but for nonverbal, just the whole observing with all of our senses.
Yeah. And your teenager may not be able to put into words what they're living because sometimes it's confusing. They may have like a ton of emotions at the same time and they're not be able to verbalize it. But looking in your own experience, and your kid, who knows their kid better than the parent? Really.
True.
You can decipher and kind of make sense of what they're going through, even though they're not talking to you. So pay attention to the signs, pay attention to the nonverbal, and much of the information that you want as a parent is in what your teenager is not telling you. And there's a lot of that going on in the teenage years.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I love that. Say that again.
Okay. A lot of the information that you need as a parent of a teenager will be in what your teenager is not telling you. So the more you can learn to look for the signs, pay attention to what's going on, behavior, what they're listening to, what they're watching, whatever. Information is everywhere. And I hear a lot about, parents tell me, I don't know what they're up to. I don't know what's going on. I'm scared for them. Breathe in, breathe out. The information is there. And sometimes the information is hidden in what you're not seeing or what you're not hearing from. There is information in no information.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So there you go.
This is really a golden nugget, because I remember, as the parent of teenagers, that frustration when they're not talking to you, they're not communicating. But if you know that, just hang in there. And my experience has been, if you develop that rapport, you have that trust, that you that unconditional love, they know you love them, and they know that you care about them. And then a little bit more, and just like you said, no communication tells you something, can tell you quite a bit.
Yeah, and you can just drop, when you're ready to talk about it, I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear what you have to say. I will receive when you're ready. And sometimes parents try to rush their kids into talking to them, creates a whole lot of problems. Teenagers have to process things. That's what they're going through. Teenager years are, it's the fastest growth pace that they're going to go through their whole lives. And they have to process a lot of changes in a very small amount of time. So if they're sleeping all day, or if they're, eating the whole fridge, it's because they need that energy, and they need to process all of those things that are going on. And the worst thing you can do is rush them.
And they need to be accepted.
Yeah. They're trying to figure out who they are. So let them figure out who they are. Don't tell them who they are. They have to figure it out.
So that listening cannot be overemphasized.
No, it cannot. The third rule is sometimes we forget that we have a whole person in front of us. That whole person has their own background, their own values, their own personality, and their own reality. What they're going through is not the same thing that what you're going through. And so your reality and your priorities may not be the same that the priority of your teenagers. But what you have to bear in mind is that your reality and your priority should not be considered more important than their reality and their priority. What I mean by that is sometimes we, say all the drama, and we dismiss their experience instead of connecting to their experience. And it's very hard for a teenager to have their parent dismiss them, because they're still looking for your approbation, and they're still looking for your love and your support. And when you dismiss what they're going through because it doesn't fit into your priority, or you have family priority, or I don't know, you're caught up at work and you forget about them, you don't, you kind of dismiss their emotions and what they're going through, it could cause a break in trust. And I always say that trust is the best currency in any relationship, and it's especially true with your teenager. You have to avoid anything that would break this trust that you have with your teenager. And trust is a two-way street. So if you break trust with them, then you can expect retaliation, because they're learning from you, right? And that goes to number 4. The fourth golden rule is, and I think it's one of the most important things that I've learned, not just throughout my professional life, but also through my personal life. I've been brought up in a family where speaking and talking about painful things was avoided at all costs. And there was one thing, though, that my parent taught me is, and I learned quite early on, that what you say and what you do, if there's a disconnect between the two, it means that you may be untrustworthy. When there's a disconnect or an inconsistency between what you say and what you do, or what, for instance, I'm going to give an example that happens in families. If you put a rule down and you don't enforce it, and I say enforce it, I don't really like that word, but if you don't follow through and follow up, then you're not only are you not coherent or consistent, but you open the door to being disrespected, of course, because they will take any advantage they can. They're growing up, they're testing the boundary. If you give them, a centimeter, they'll take a meter. But over that is, if you talk about other people, or if you say that you stand for a value, for instance, you're about justice, you're about something, and there's something you do in your everyday life that contradicts what you're saying or what you're pretending to stand for. Teenagers are quite prone and quite good at finding the discrepancy and dismissing you because you are not being coherent, you are not being consistent, and therefore you cannot be trusted. And when they're teenagers, they're trying to bond with like-minded people, with people, that share the same values. They're testing, I say different hats, different people, different identities, and see if that fits. And if you've brought them up saying that you were, standing for that kind of value set, and they discover in their teenage years that you're full of
hypocrisy, I've heard
yes,
that.
exactly. Yeah. This can cause major problems because your teenager is going to start questioning you, is going to start questioning your authority because you've lost credibility into their eyes, and therefore they no longer trust you. They're going to trust themselves, or worse, they're going to go find another role model. We're talking a lot about, how people get radicalized or people get into gangs. Teenagers are looking for structure any way they can. So if the parent is not there, or if the parent, into their own eyes, has lost that credibility, they are still looking for those role models, and they are still looking for those influences. And if they don't find it at home, they're going to go look elsewhere, and you may not have control over who they fall on with. And that's where trouble can start.
I'm thinking of the example of if the parent is expecting honesty from the teenager, but they don't see honesty in the parent, they're not being honest themselves.
Exactly.
Then
and
it means nothing.
It makes total sense. I mean, we've evolved as a social animal, and we've evolved, following leaders and having people to protect us and protect the group. And when we're growing up in teenage years, we are looking for kind of an exterior family, like to extend our social circle and to try to learn new things and have other influences that will start shaping the adult that we will become. So we're testing different things. When you say, you stand for honesty, and the teenager is finding that their parent is dishonest or is hiding things or is lying to their face, they're going to go find someone that doesn't appear necessarily to lie to their face, but the lesson that they might learn from those experiences may be really detrimental because they don't have the safety of the parent, and they don't have this unconditional love you were talking about.
Yes, and I've seen that instance. By the time they're 12 or 13, if they feel like my parents don't have anything of value to offer to me, they fire you as the parent.
Yes, and it can be quite hurtful. I've seen parents, when they're young, when they're small, you're their whole world. In the teenage years, they start expanding their social circle, and can be quite a trauma for a parent, who was used to have this little being that was reflecting back all this love and all these
now
things.
They'd rather be with their friends.
Yes. So parents,
which is the way it's supposed to be, but it still hurts.
It is, but this kind of grief, I think every parent goes through. Not every parent reacts the same way, and it's the same thing for kids. I mean, this grief also goes on in the mind of the kid. We kind of forget it's painful to grow up. I remember when I was growing up, as a teenager, I remember at the age of 11, my mom came inside my room with a big garbage bag and said, okay, we're going to give away all your stuffed animals, put them in there. I cried. And I mean, I was 11 years old. I was like, I didn't want to let go of them because it was my childhood. And so I think we forget that for the kids too, it's traumatizing. You see, I'm always welling up, but I'm almost welling up because it's a trauma. Growing up is a trauma. And
it is. And this is why you need that communication, making sure, inviting them. Here's one thing we can do. Are you ready to do that?
And
let them have some input.
It ties into the fifth yes. strategy. And it goes to when we have young kids, we have to be in charge. So we have to make the decisions, and we tend to hide our mistakes because we don't want to scare the children. We want to make sure that they feel safe and supported, and that, you are the man or you are the woman. So, you are the hero. When they grow older, it's time to take off the mask and start showing more vulnerability. Because it goes back to the emotional intelligence, but it's also, they are trying to connect and they're finding ways to connect. And the best way for any human being to connect to another being is to show more vulnerability. I've been, again, brought up in a family where we hid our emotions. The emotions were like weakness. And I think many, many families go through the same thing. And only when I was able to discover that by showing vulnerability, you're actually inviting people in. It was a game changer for me. And I think for any parent, showing vulnerability, and I don't mean in a manipulative kind of way, because sometimes people kind of use it like, you're hurting me, you're hurting my feelings. That's not the way.
Manipulative. It can be manipulative, but if you're just being genuine.
Yeah, you have to be genuine. And it goes back to being, aware of your emotional state. But if you make a mistake, or if you were wrong about something, some parents have the tendency to hide it from their kids and avoid apologizing or avoid saying that.
Or deny it. No, but it doesn't strengthen that bond when the parent can apologize. I really handled that wrong. I lost my temper. I'm sorry.
Yes. And imagine the lesson that it teaches the child. Like, it's okay to admit you were wrong. And it's okay to, just put that olive branch. And it requires courage. Vulnerability is taking the walls down. It requires courage. And I'm pretty sure any parent listening to this show will be absolutely, will agree with us that showing your kid courage is probably the best skill you can teach them. And vulnerability is a big part of showing your kid courage and responsibility and accountability. You want to bring your kids so they will become responsible adults, accountable adults, reliable adults. And you can do that by leading by example. And that's what parenting is about, is improving your skills, showing the way and leading by example. It's the basics of any leadership skills, is showing by example and provide a safety, emotional safety, physical safety. And we sometimes forget about the emotional safety.
Yes.
In our things, but it's probably should come even before physical safety. And people may throw tomatoes at me because yes, the kid has to eat.
Yeah.
If he or she feels, or they feel supported, then they've got the inner resources to go find what they need.
If they can learn to believe in themselves.
Yeah.
If they can believe they have value, they have worth.
And, when you're not anxious about, are you loved? Are you enough? Am I right? Am I doing the right thing? Am I loved? when this is just a given and you feel confident in that, then your brain can start working on strategies to go get resources outside. But I know that resources or outside resources you can always find. And if you're vulnerable, you can ask for help. And people want to help. People don't know how much other people want to help.
Yes, yes.
It's just a question of, physical things.
As long as there's that desire, as long as your teenager is feeling I'm worth it, then you're right. You're right.
It's a kind of an inner confidence.
Yeah.
Transform the environment or transform the reality. Once this is figured out, it's way easier to go about life and be successful. Of course, depends of what your definition of being successful is, but I'm pretty sure parents want their kids to be happy.
Yes, yes. And they want them to be pursuing their own dream.
Yeah. So you want to make sure that this inner state or inner world is filled up to the brim.
Yes.
And once that is done, you just have to trust your teenager to make the right decisions, because they will.
Yes. All right. Well, in the 5 minutes we have left, I want to just sum this up, and then I want to make sure you have time to talk about your program. So first, we need to regulate our emotions. We need to have control over our emotions, and that we remember listening. The majority of communication is listening, and not just with our ears, with our other senses. We're listening to nonverbal as well as verbal communication. And then we're accepting their experiences. It may seem trivial to us, but it's important to them. So we accept their experiences. We treat them with respect, and we're consistent. We don't say one thing and do another. And then we're vulnerable. We're human around them, and we apologize when it's appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay. Did I leave anything out?
That will go a long way. If you have these strategies and you master those, pretty much, you're going to surf through the teenage years and you're going to be fine.
Well, I know you just finished a summit. You have parent lead coaching, and so people can find you on Facebook, just searching parent lead coaching, right?
Yeah, well, I can I put some links in the description? In the
chat? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, share.
Then I've got a group on Facebook. That's, of course, it's a group you can join. You're free to come. I put content in there. I wasn't super on top of it in the past few months because of my summit. It was just crazy, but I will get back into it. So this is the this is the group, the Facebook group.
Okay, and just in case they can't save the chat, it would be searching Parent Lead Coaching, right?
Parent Lead Coaching is my company. My website is parentleadcoaching.com. And I have a workshop coming up January 15 and January 16. It's a 4-hour workshop called Easy Comes with Your Teens. We're going to go deeper into what we discussed today. We're going to learn mistakes that sometimes parents do when it comes to discussing or communicating with our teenagers. So we're going to go dive into that. So January 15 and 16. And then I have a group coaching program, a 12-week group coaching program starting at the end of January. You can find all of the information on my website, parentleadcoaching.com. Or if you want to have a free clarity call with me, just send me an email at Pascale@parentleadcoaching. That figures in the underneath my face in the show. Just send me
yes,
an email.
It is.
Just send me an email there, and we'll find time to talk about what your challenges are with your teenager and figure out a way that I can help you.
Parentleadcoaching.com. Thank you, Pascale. And thank you all for joining us. Come back next week at the same time. We'll be interviewing Rosalind Sadaka, and she founded the Child-Centered Divorce Center.
Oh, I would.
So
totally
it's
talk to
all,
her.
yeah, she's amazing. And
Thank you, Emma Lou. Thank you so much for
Very-
hosting me again. It's always a pleasure to have a discussion with you.
yes, remember to love yourself and love your family. We're making the world a better place by strengthening families, one family at a time. This is Emma Lou Penrod at healingyourfamilies.com.